Welcome to this first video from Make It Simple for Yourself, or Missify. Today we're going to look at scratch building a Sphinx on a sandy base. With that said, let's get started. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to make the substructure from cardboard. We basically need to draw out our design. I've done this freehand and I'm not the best artist in the world, so you know, it's what we do what we can. So I'm just drawing it out in pencil first. Important to try and get this first one done as neatly as possible. We're going to use this for the rest of the layout. So what we're going to do next, just go over it in black marker. I've got pencil design so that it's clearer, both for me and for yourselves to see it all. Once we've got this first one done, we're going to just cut this out just using an X-Acto knife. This will give us our first layer of the substructure and a template for us to draw the rest of. And bear in mind I'm doing quite simple. The Sphinx I'm doing is headless, mainly because I'm not very good at making heads, drawing faces. But you could use this for pretty much any design that you want. Once we've got our first shape cut out, what we're going to do is trace around this to make a number of others. As you can see here, I'm just minimizing the amount of cardboard I use. Not that it really matters, it's waste cardboard. It's from a box that I had delivered. I should say this corrugated cardboard, single corrugated cardboard. Make it easier, I just draw the base ones and then line up the second one with the original base. Once we've got all the pieces cut out, we'll just put them all together side by side just to see whether we've got the right depth, right thickness for the one that we want to create. Could have possibly gone with the extra layer in each of these, but first of all, we're going to glue together the three, what will be the innermost pieces of the structure, just using a glue stick. What we want to do is to give it some shape Once we've got these three pieces glued together, the next one we want to sort of cut it a little bit off the height of each one so that it steps down a little. So I've just eyeballed it and freehand just taken a little bit off the back. As you can see, that steps down. Now I took a little bit too much off here, and what I decided was this would be the outermost edge, so I traced that one out onto another one so that I end up with a symmetrical design. And once I've got two of those, for the remaining two pieces I marked out something that was in between the inner and the outer levels and cut them down so that we've got a smoothish gradient. I mean, obviously it's stepped down rather than direct smoothness. And then once I knew I had the right pieces, just glued them all together. Doesn't matter if this isn't perfect. As I said, it's a ruined Sphinx that we're making. Just make sure that your bottom edge is all lined up. Everything else is then fine, so you can see rather blurry shot. What we have is it steps down, gives you a sort of rounded thing. Now I've cut out the middle three layers here from the front paws so that we have a gap between them. I should have probably cut them out before I glued them. Would have been easier. What I take is two of the cut off pieces and glue them to the back to give you the hind legs shape. But now what we're going to do is cover this with, I use epoxy clay. You could use air drying clay or any, not sure whether you could use the oven drying polymer clay because of the cardboard inside, but I would imagine it'd be okay because we're going to fully cover the cardboard. So the delight of this epoxy clay is it gives you a good 4-hour working time. Basically just mix together two equal parts of part A and part B. Part B has a tendency to be very difficult to get out, very hard in the pot, but once it's mixed with part A it does soften up with the heat from your hands when you're blending the two parts together. I also have the problem that I suffer from carpal tunnel, so I have some weakness in my hands which makes it hard to get out. I've been told I should use a spoon. Now we've got two pieces, like I said, that equal size. We just sort of mash it all together so that they are slightly different in colour, so you try and get it so it's all one even colour with no streak. Basically it works the same as epoxy glue, two-part epoxy. Give that a good mash. The heat from your hand will just make it quite soft and pliable in the end. Now I'm just going to roll it out. I have this acrylic roller and a little acrylic sheet to roll this out on. So tear a bit off, spread it out with your fingers and roll it as you would piece of pastry, it's a good idea to lessen the stickiness of it, to just coat the roller and the base with a bit of water. Still does have a tendency to stick if you don't want to get it too wet, but so a bit of water just dabbed on them does make it a little easier to roll out. But, you know, we're not going for an even shape here, we're just going for an even thickness. And the thickness depends on your personal preference. Once we've got it, remove it from the rolling sheet, lay it over your cardboard mannequin and shape it down around. Now I'm using a clay shaper here, basically a pen or anything will do just to get it pushed around. Trim it off with a knife. As you can see, it's not fully covered at this point in time, so what we do next is we basically just fill in all the gaps. You don't need to roll all these out individually, you can just squash these out with your finger. Try and get it all covered. Neaten it up as much as you want. Again, it's a ruin, so it doesn't matter. Wet your fingers with a little bit of water and smooth it down. Smooths together the edges, gets rid of fingerprints. In the early stages it does take fingerprints very, very easily, but if you leave it a while and come back to it, sort of first 30 minutes it's very, very sticky. After that it gets a little easier to work with as it starts to harden up. I said you have up to about 4 hours before it's just too hard and, you know, to do any more modelling with. As you can see with this one, I've left it so that you can see some of the ridges from the cardboard. Give it sort of stepped look. If you don't want this, you could cover it with another layer, make it thicker. And we need to allow it to dry, 24 hours to dry. And then we're going to give it a paint. Here I'm using just a yellow ochre paint. I also tried quite a vivid yellow paint, you know, I have as well on the second model, which you can see sitting on the plate, paint palette. I actually in the end decided that wet blending the two together gave me a better finish. Just cover all the top, you don't need to paint on it, just get all the top covered with your base coat. So this is the material I'm going to be using for the base. It's EPVC. I got this scrap from a carpenter friend. You can buy it. It's sometimes known as Formex. It's a expanded PVC. When you're cutting it, it cuts easily with a knife. I say easily. You need to give it multiple passes with the knife, but quite simple to cut. Be sanded, be beveled quite easily again with the knife. It doesn't need any special tool, just a good sharp knife. So it gives you a good solid base, similar to MDF. No dust, and a lot easier to cut with a knife. Because that gives us quite a flat edge, we're just going to bevel the edge round. It doesn't matter if it's a bit chunky, you might want to make it a bit more rounded. Just take care when you cut this, cut towards yourself. I'm cut towards myself. If you're not confident with the knife, make sure you cut away. And just give it a sand to smooth out the roughness on the bevel. This means you haven't got a sharp step up. Now the base coat's dried. The smaller one is the one that you've seen me building so far, the Barbie one I did earlier. I'm going to use a sort of creamy white colour just to give it a dry brushing. I'm using an old makeup brush, a cheap makeup brush, perhaps set from the pound shop. Get the paint on, get most of it off. Paper towel, piece of tissue. And then just using like circularish motion. Give it an overall dry brush, just trying to catch the high point. To attach them up to the base. I'm going to use the 2-part epoxy glue. Squeeze it out, get it mixed up. Using a scrappable lolly stick. I should have taken a little bit more care with the underside. Got a little bit flatter than I did. My bad. Though overall, when it's finished, they do look good. And just attach them to the bases. As you'll notice, there's been no measuring done. It's all been done by eye. Use rulers for cutting straight lines and markings on the cutting maps to get some, corners. And what I'm going to use for basing this is basically some of the old plaster runoff from casting, which I've got into a jar and crushed with a metal bottle. Get it down to a mixture of a fine, almost powdery plaster and a few larger chunks. What I actually want for the sand is the very fine powdery stuff. Sorry about the blurry camera. And to get this out, I used a piece of old muslin. And basically just shake it through just to get the fine cast off. Sieve would have done just as well. Fine sieve so it doesn't let the bigger chunks through. You don't need a lot. And I'm going to use the Crafter's Pick Ultimate Glue, which is a very strong PVA type glue. Also works with the contact adhesive. Got this from Fred Aldous online. You just squeeze it around the edges. Bead all round. And I'm just going to smooth it over the base using my finger. Also, just to get into the under the edges and into the smaller spaces, I've got the offcut of EVA foam from another project I was doing. Just cut into a point and used as a spreader for the glue. Once you've got the glue spread all over the base, just pop it into your fine plaster, cast off, give it a shake, gives it a nice covering all over. Now in hindsight, I would probably, doing this again, probably use super glue or the epoxy as a glue. This Crafter's glue does take quite a while to dry. Great for flocking because you can do the old wet, drop everything over it and it soaks it up as well. But with this being plaster, didn't do it. So I took them outside and gave them a quick spray with some varnish. Hence, see it's a lot shinier on the actual sphinxes. At this point, I was going to airbrush the base and expound the delights of my cheap 30-odd pound airbrush and compressor. At which point I found that the button had broken on the compressor. After mixing up the paint in the pot, so I then had to brush the paint on in the good old-fashioned way. So I'm using the thin down paint from that I had set up ready for the using the airbrush. Just to give it a base colour of the Reaper Bones Desert Stone paint. So it contrasts nicely with the actual statues. And once that dried, just used the Reaper Bones Desert Sand just to give it an all over dry brushing, including the the actual model, the actual Sphinx themselves base. That picks out the stones on the base. You'll see some of the big larger stones stuck on there as well. And dry brushing the whole thing with it just helps tie the model together a little better. See, it's picking out some of the texture on the base there. So, here we have the finished item. As you can see, the larger one is much smoother than the second. Some of the larger stones do give it a nice look, and as I said, it didn't matter that it wasn't too neat, as these are meant to be all weather damaged ruins. I was debating whether to give them an overall wash, but I'm going to leave that for now, as I have some other pieces that I need to do in the same series. So when I look at it all together, then I'll decide whether I'm going to give it a wash. So overall, a fun little project, easy to do, and allows you to make a nice 3D landscape piece if you don't have a 3D printer. That's all for this week's build. The next build will be 2 weeks' time, posted on Friday. Hope to see you then. Till then, keep building.